I never thought the child I raised with my bare hands, the boy I sacrificed everything for, would one day look me in the eye and tell me to stop being so dramatic. Even now, when I repeat those words in my head, they cut deeper than any knife. Tell me, what mother deserves that? My name is Eleanor Parker. I'm 68 years old, retired after spending 40 years as a schoolteacher in Sacramento, California. Most people who knew me back then would say I was the kind of woman who smiled through storms and gave away my umbrella, even if it meant standing in the rain. But raising a child alone in America wasn't easy. Especially when that child was abandoned by his father at the age of 4. When Daniel's father walked out, I remember standing in the kitchen, clutching the letter he left on the counter. No explanation. No money. Just an empty space where a man used to be. My heart was broken, but my first thought wasn't about me, it was about Daniel. I promised myself right then, my son would never feel the sting of being unwanted. So I became both parents. I worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day, tutoring in the evenings, and cleaning offices on weekends. I remember scrubbing floors at night with tears burning my eyes, whispering, "This is for you, Danny." My body was tired, but my love for him never ran dry. Before I begin, I want to mention that the Mama True Story channel is having a $200 giveaway to celebrate our subscribers. I can hardly believe so people are interested in this old lady's stories. To participate, it's simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, a little about yourself, or share a beautiful story. I'd love to know who you are. Now, let's get back to my story. Every birthday, even when money was tight, I found a way to bake him a cake. It didn't matter if I had to pawn my jewelry or skip my own meals. Daniel always had presents, balloons, and friends gathered around the table. When he joined school trips, I filled out the permission slips with trembling hands, praying the check I wrote wouldn't bounce. Sometimes it did, but I still found a way to make things right. And when the day came that he was accepted into college, I thought all those sacrifices had finally paid off. I can still see the acceptance letter in his hands, his face lighting up like the little boy I used to rock to sleep. He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I drained the last of my savings to pay his tuition deposit. For me, there was no hesitation. A mother gives, even when she has nothing left. That's the thing about mothers, isn't it? We pour ourselves out like water into everyone else's cup, even when our own glass is bone dry. But here's the part that stings, sometimes the very people we fill up are the ones who later throw that glass in our face. Looking back, I wonder if I spoiled him with too much sacrifice. Did I shield him from struggle so well that he forgot how hard life can be? Did I teach him love without teaching him respect? I ask myself those questions late at night, when the house is quiet. But at the time, I didn't see any of it. I only saw my boy. My sweet, smiling boy who told me, one day, "Mom, I'll take care of you the way you took care of me." If only I had known those words were empty. Because years later, when he stood tall in a sharp suit with a diamond ring in his pocket, announcing that he was engaged, I thought my sacrifices had finally bloomed into joy. I thought I was about to be welcomed, celebrated, cherished. But life has a way of teaching you hard lessons when you least expect it. And mine came wrapped in wedding invitations, champagne flutes, and the cruel smirk of a woman named Madison Hayes. Tell me, have you ever given your whole soul to someone, only to watch them hand it to another person who despises you? That was the beginning of my downfall. But not the end. Because what Daniel didn't realize is that when a mother is pushed too far, when her love is used like a doormat, she finds a different kind of strength. The kind that doesn't just forgive. The kind that waits. And my waiting had just begun. I remember the day Daniel told me he was engaged. He came over to my little condo with a grin stretched wide across his face, the kind I hadn't seen since he was a boy. For a moment, I felt my heart leap. Maybe all the years of sacrifice were finally worth it. Maybe I would see my son start a family, give me grandchildren, and keep me close the way he had always promised. "Mom," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets like a teenager again, "I want you to meet someone." Her name was Madison Hayes. From the very first moment I shook her hand, I could tell she wasn't like us. She came from money. You could see it in the way she carried herself, her posture straight as a board, her nails perfectly polished, her smile just a little too rehearsed. She said all the right words. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Parker. Daniel has told me so much about you." But her eyes told a different story. Cold. Measuring. As if she were trying to figure out how a woman like me had produced the man she planned to marry. I brushed it off. Love makes young people nervous, I told myself. She'll warm up. Daniel's excitement made me ignore the unease curling in my stomach. He explained that Madison's parents were from Chicago, a family with connections and a reputation. "This wedding is going to be big, Mom," he said proudly. "Really big." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "As long as you're happy, son, that's all that matters." But already, I noticed little things. When Madison showed me the ring, she extended her hand so quickly I almost dropped my teacup trying to catch the sparkle. 2 carats, she said, as if it were a scorecard. When I complimented it, she simply nodded, her smile tight, her eyes flicking to Daniel like she was making sure he was trained. Later that evening, after she left, Daniel leaned against my kitchen counter with a dreamy look. "Mom, this is the woman of my dreams. She's classy, she's got connections, she's perfect." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to share in his joy. But something in me hesitated. You know when your bones whisper to you, telling you something isn't right, even when your heart wants to ignore it? That's how I felt. And yet, I said nothing. I told myself not to interfere, not to dampen his happiness. After all, hadn't I spent my whole life protecting him? So I smiled, hugged him tight, and said the words he wanted to hear. "I'm happy for you, Danny. I can't wait to see you marry the love of your life." But deep down, I couldn't shake the look Madison gave me when she thought no one was watching. It was the kind of look a person gives to an obstacle in their way. And I had no idea just how far she would go to push me aside. A few weeks after the engagement, Daniel called me one evening. I could hear the excitement in his voice, but also a kind of nervous edge. "Mom, Madison and I found the perfect venue," he said. "It's a vineyard in Napa Valley. Gorgeous, Mom. You should see the pictures, rolling hills, chandeliers, even a lake." I could picture it, even without the photos. Something straight out of a magazine, the kind of place families like mine would only ever see from afar. "That sounds beautiful, Danny," I said softly. "Have you booked it yet?" There was a pause. Then his voice dropped lower. "Well, we put down a deposit. But, Madison's parents can't cover the full amount. They've already helped a lot. I was wondering if you could help us out with the rest." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Help with the rest? I thought about the pension checks, the little savings account I'd built over decades, the emergency fund I had in case my health failed. That money wasn't much, but it was all I had. Still, when he asked me, I didn't hesitate. Of course, Danny. Whatever you need. The next day, I drove to the bank and signed the paperwork to liquidate part of my small investment account. The teller asked if I was sure. I smiled, even as my stomach nodded. Yes, it's for my son's wedding. I told myself it wasn't just money, it was love, proof of my devotion. Didn't every mother want to see her son's dream come true? When I handed Daniel the check, his face lit up. He hugged me tight, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're the best mom in the world." For a moment, I believed it. But later that night, as I sat at my kitchen table with the receipts spread out before me, reality crept in. The number was big, far bigger than I'd ever spent on anything. I whispered to myself, it's just this one time. Just the venue. After this, they'll handle the rest. I wanted to believe that lie. The following week, I overheard Madison telling one of her friends, "Oh, Daniel's mom is covering the vineyard." Isn't that sweet? The way she said it made my skin prickle, not sweet like gratitude, but sweet like amusement, as if I were some gullible old woman to be laughed at. I pushed the thought away. Don't overthink it, Eleanor, I told myself. This is what mothers do. And for a while, I carried that thought like a shield. I convinced myself I was helping, that I was doing the right thing. But deep down, something felt off. Because once you give someone a piece of yourself, it's never enough. They always come back for more. And I would soon learn that the vineyard was only the beginning of the demands that would bleed me dry. Mama True Story channel is having a $200 giveaway to celebrate our subscribers. I can hardly believe so people are interested in this stories. To participate, it's simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, a little about yourself, or share a beautiful story. I'd love to know who you are. Now, back to my story. 3 days before the wedding, Madison's parents hosted a small gathering at their home in Chicago to finalize the seating chart and other details. I took the train up from Sacramento, carrying my worn leather notebook, the same one I'd used for years to budget bills and grocery lists. Their house was everything mine wasn't: grand, sprawling, decorated with gold frames and polished marble floors that gleamed under chandeliers. I felt out of place the second I stepped inside. Madison's mother greeted me with a smile so tight it looked painful. Her pearls glistened around her neck, each one probably worth more than my entire savings account. She motioned for me to sit at the long dining table, where charts, menus, and wine glasses were already spread out. I tried to contribute, asking where certain relatives would be seated, suggesting that maybe the florist arrangements didn't need to cost quite so much. That's when it happened. Daniel slammed his palm lightly against the table, his jaw tight. "Mom, can you please stop being so dramatic? It's my wedding, not yours. Just, stay out of it." The words hung in the air like smoke. My heart dropped. I could feel the blood rush to my face, the sting of tears pressing at the corners of my eyes. I looked around the table. Madison smirked, her lips curling with satisfaction. Her mother's eyebrows arched, almost amused, as though she'd been waiting for this moment. Even Madison's father chuckled under his breath, shaking his head like I was some silly old woman who didn't know her place. And my son, my Daniel, sat back in his chair, avoiding my gaze. He didn't take it back. He didn't apologize. He just let those words sit there, heavy and cruel, in front of people who already thought less of me. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. I wanted to scream, to remind him of every late night I stayed awake to help him with homework, of every birthday I scraped coins together to make special, of every dream I'd sacrificed so he could have his. I wanted to shake him and ask, "How dare you treat me this way?" But I didn't. Instead, I folded my notebook shut, placed it neatly on the table, and said nothing. The silence that followed was worse than the insult. It was as if I had been erased from the room, dismissed like background noise. The conversation picked back up, laughter resuming, wine glasses clinking. And I sat there, small and invisible, a guest at my own son's betrayal. That night, when I returned to my hotel room, I finally let the tears fall. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the reflection of my tired face in the mirror. "Stop being dramatic, Mom," the words echoed again and again. "Tell me, what child says that to the mother who raised him alone? What son humiliates his own blood in front of strangers?" I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the slow thud of my heart. It ached, but there was something else stirring beneath the pain. Something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. In that moment, I realized I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself to a son who saw me as a burden. If he wanted me out of the picture, perhaps it was time I stepped back. But not in the way he imagined. Because if Daniel thought I was dramatic before, he had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. And I was about to show him. I didn't say a word after Daniel cut me down in front of Madison's family. Not at the table, not on the ride back to my hotel, not even when he texted later that night, "Sorry, Mom. It's just wedding stress. Don't take it personal." Stress. That was his excuse. As if stress gave him the right to humiliate the woman who had carried him through life with her own two hands. I stared at that message until the screen went black. Then I set the phone down and refused to reply. For once, I didn't rush to smooth things over. I let the silence hang. But silence can be a strange thing. To others, it looks like surrender. To the person holding it, silence can be a weapon. In the days that followed, I carried myself calmly. I smiled when people expected me to. I answered politely when spoken to. But inside, something had shifted. It was as if the pain of his words had burned away the last remnants of the naive mother who believed her love would always be enough. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, his voice sharp, Madison's smirk, her mother's pearls glistening as she laughed under her breath. The memory stabbed at me, but it also fueled me. Every time I saw their faces in my mind, I grew less broken and more certain. Do you know that moment when grief turns into anger, and anger hardens into resolve? That's where I was. I thought about all the years I had given Daniel everything, the meals I skipped so he could eat, the nights I walked home from my second job in the rain, the times I went without new clothes so he could wear something nice to school. All of it, erased by a single sentence meant to put me in my place. Well, maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't my wedding. But what he didn't realize was that my name was on every contract. Every vendor. Every last bill. And one day soon, that fact would matter more than anything. I didn't plot revenge out loud. I didn't make threats. I didn't raise my voice. I simply waited, letting my son and his bride-to-be believe I had accepted my role as the quiet, dramatic mother to be ignored. But inside me, a storm was forming. Because when you silence a woman who has given her whole life to you, when you humiliate her and strip her dignity, you don't kill her spirit. You sharpen it. And though Daniel didn't know it yet, the very silence he demanded of me would become the loudest lesson he would ever learn. It started with a phone call from the florist. "Mrs. Parker?" a cheerful voice asked. "We just wanted to confirm the final order for the orchids. Since you signed the contract, we'll need your approval before we process the balance." I froze. "Since you signed the contract?" "Yes," I murmured, forcing my voice steady. "Go ahead." When I hung up, I stared at the phone in my hand. My name. My approval. My responsibility. A day later, the photographer called. Then the tuxedo rental company. Each one addressed me the same way, "Mrs. Parker, since you're on the account." By the third call, the truth settled over me like ice water. Daniel hadn't just asked me to help. He had shifted the entire financial weight of this wedding onto my shoulders. Every vendor, every bill, every signature, they were all tied to me. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, bills and receipts spread around me, my notebook open with numbers scribbled across the pages. $45,000, maybe more. Money I didn't have. Money I had never agreed to spend. At first, my hands shook. How could my own son do this to me? Did he think I wouldn't notice? Or worse, did he think I would notice but never dare to say a word? The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. He had counted on me. Counted on my love. Counted on the fact that I had always swooped in to fix his problems, from forgotten homework assignments to overdue rent in his 20s. He believed, deep down, that I would never let him fall. That was my real crime as a mother, wasn't it? I had raised him to believe I would sacrifice myself endlessly, no matter the cost. And now, in the most important moment of his life, he saw me not as his mother, but as his safety net. His shield. His bank. I thought about calling him right then, demanding answers. But what good would that do? He would only smooth-talk me, assure me it was temporary, promise me I'd be repaid. And I knew myself, I'd probably give in again. So I stayed silent. Instead of anger, I let the realization sink in slowly, like poison in the bloodstream. I wasn't just being taken advantage of. I was being erased. My love was being rewritten as obligation. Tell me, how many of you have given and given, only to discover the person you gave everything to saw it not as love, but as their right? That night, I folded up the papers and put them in a drawer. I sat quietly on the couch, staring at the ceiling. My chest hurt, but my mind felt sharp in a way it hadn't in years. Daniel thought he had me trapped. But what he didn't realize was this: when you back a woman into a corner, she doesn't always stay there. Sometimes, she waits. Sometimes, she watches. And sometimes, she uses the very trap you set against you. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I played my part like an actress on stage. I showed up when invited, nodded politely when Madison's parents rattled off plans, and smiled faintly when Daniel talked about how everything was coming together. Inside, I was a storm. But on the outside, I was quiet as still water. They mistook my silence for surrender. Madison looked past me as if I were a piece of furniture. Her mother stopped including me in decisions altogether. And Daniel, he walked around with the smug confidence of a man who believed his mother would always be there to clean up the mess. Every time I signed another receipt, every time a vendor thanked me for handling the details, I bit my tongue and kept my face calm. I wanted them all to think I had accepted my place. But the truth was, I was waiting. I knew the calls would come. The final payments. The moment when money had to change hands before services were delivered. And when that time came, I had already decided what I would do, or rather, what I would not do. At night, alone in my little motel room in Napa, I rehearsed the silence. I pictured Daniel's face when the reality hit him, when the safety net he had counted on suddenly vanished. I imagined Madison's fury, her family's embarrassment, the whispers among the guests. And I told myself, patience, Eleanor. Let them walk into their own downfall. Tell me, have you ever realized that the most powerful move you can make isn't action, but an action? That sometimes the loudest statement is refusing to play the role they assign to you? That was my plan. To stay quiet. To let them think I was weak, dramatic, pliable. To let them lean so heavily on me that when I finally stepped aside, they would fall flat on their faces. By the time the wedding week arrived, my decision was sealed. The dress was steamed, the flowers ordered, the cake promised. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Guests flew in, booked hotel rooms, and polished their shoes for the big day. No one noticed the cracks. No one saw the trap waiting beneath the glitter. Except me. Because I wasn't just Daniel's mother anymore. I was the woman holding the strings. And when I chose to let go, his entire dream wedding would unravel in front of the world. And so, with a quiet smile and steady hands, I waited for the wedding morning, the day my silence would finally speak louder than all of their laughter combined. Mama True Story channel is having a $200 giveaway to celebrate our subscribers. I can hardly believe so people are interested in this stories. To participate, it's simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, a little about yourself, or share a beautiful story. I'd love to know who you are. Now, let's get back to my story. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and golden over Napa Valley. Sunlight spilled across the vineyard hills, glinting off rows of grapes and casting long shadows over the estate. To the guests arriving, it must have looked like a dream. But to me, it felt more like the calm before a storm. I woke early in my motel room, took my time getting dressed, and pressed my palms together until they stopped trembling. Today was the day. The day everything they had built on my back would come crashing down. When I arrived at the estate, cars were already pulling into the driveway. Guests in elegant dresses and tailored suits stepped out, laughing, snapping photos against the vineyard backdrop. A string quartet played softly in the garden, the notes floating in the warm air. Inside the bridal suite, chaos reigned. Madison barked orders at the makeup artists, demanding a different shade of lipstick. Her bridesmaids hovered nervously, adjusting her gown, fluffing the layers of white lace. I watched from the doorway for a moment. Her reflection in the mirror was stunning, flawless hair, radiant skin, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She caught sight of me in the glass and smirked faintly, as though to remind me of my place. "Mrs. Parker," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "thank you again for all your help. We couldn't have done this without you." The way she lingered on help felt like an insult wrapped in politeness. I simply nodded, offering a small smile. If only she knew what I knew. In the groom's suite, Daniel paced back and forth in his tuxedo, his hands fiddling with his cufflinks. He looked every bit the proud groom, but I recognized the nerves behind his smile. When our eyes met, he grinned. "Big day, huh, Mom?" he said. "Yes, Daniel," I replied softly. "A very big day." The guests were ushered into the garden as the ceremony approached. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle, each decorated with fresh roses. The altar stood tall beneath an archway of flowers, every detail picture perfect. From the outside, it was the kind of wedding people would talk about for years. But I couldn't stop thinking about the cracks beneath the surface. The vendors who still hadn't been paid in full. The caterers who had called me twice that week with polite reminders. The balance hanging over Daniel's head like a guillotine. I sat quietly near the back as the ceremony began. Madison walked down the aisle on her father's arm, smiling like royalty. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he took her hands. The vows were exchanged, the rings slipped on, the applause thundered. To everyone else, it was a fairy tale. But as the newlyweds kissed and turned to face the cheering crowd, my phone buzzed in my purse. I felt the vibration against my hip and knew instantly who it was. The caterers. The moment had come. As the applause from the ceremony faded and the guests began to mingle, my phone buzzed again. I slipped it from my purse, glanced at the number, and stepped quietly away from the crowd. "Mrs. Parker," a man's voice said, professional but tense. "This is Anthony from Prestige Catering. We're preparing to load the trucks, but we still haven't received the final payment. The balance is $15,000. We'll need it cleared within the next hour, or I'm afraid we can't proceed." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. 15,000. My son's dream reception, his pride, his image, all of it rested on me. But instead of panic, I felt an odd calm. Like a weight sliding from my shoulders. "Thank you for letting me know," I said softly. "I'll make sure the message gets where it needs to go." When I hung up, I didn't head for my checkbook. I didn't call the bank. I simply walked back toward the garden, the sounds of laughter and champagne glasses filling the air. Inside the groom's suite, I found Daniel tugging at his tie, grinning nervously as guests congratulated him. When he saw me, relief washed over his face. "Mom. Everything okay?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The caterers just called. They need 15,000 now, or they're not coming." The smile vanished. His face went pale, his hand slipping from his tie. "What? Why'd they call you?" "Because," I said evenly, "I'm the one who signed the contracts." He swallowed hard, the color draining from his cheeks. "Mom, please, just pay it. Cover it, and I'll reimburse you after the honeymoon." "You know I will." I shook my head slowly. "No, Daniel. Not this time." His voice cracked, rising in pitch. "Mom, you can't do this to me. Everyone's here, Madison's parents. If there's no food, no reception, the whole wedding will collapse," I finished for him. His hands trembled as he reached for me, gripping my arm. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" I leaned closer, my voice low but sharp enough to cut. "Because you told me to stop being dramatic. You told me to stay out of it. Well, I'm out of it now. This is your wedding, Daniel. Handle it." He stared at me, wide-eyed, as though seeing me for the first time. Not the mother who sacrificed everything for him. Not the woman who had carried his burdens for decades. But someone he couldn't control anymore. "Please, Mom," he whispered. Don't ruin this for me. I pulled my arm free from his grasp. I'm not ruining anything, Daniel. I'm just letting you live with the choices you made. He stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a child searching for words. Outside, guests laughed, glasses clinked, and the vineyard glowed in the afternoon sun. But inside that suite, I saw the panic spread across my son's face like wildfire. And I knew the show was just beginning. Daniel's face had gone ghostly pale. He kept tugging at his tie as though it were choking him, his breath shallow and ragged. 15,000, he muttered under his breath, pacing the room. They need it now, what am I supposed to do? I sat down in one of the chairs by the window, crossing my legs calmly. You could start, I said softly, by handling your own wedding like a man. He spun toward me, eyes wide, desperation spilling from him. Mom, please. You don't understand. Madison's parents already think I'm barely good enough for her. If this gets out, if they find out I don't even have the money to pay for catering, I'll be humiliated. I raised my brows. Humiliated, Daniel? Do you know what humiliation feels like? It feels like sitting at a table while your only child tells you to stay out of his life. It feels like watching your son trade his mother's dignity for approval from strangers. He flinched, as though my words had struck him harder than any slap could. The door creaked open, and Madison stepped in, her veil pushed back, her eyes narrowed. What's going on? Why aren't you mingling with the guests? And why do you look like you've seen a ghost? Daniel stammered, glancing at me before turning back to her. It's nothing, babe. Just a little hiccup with the vendors. Mom's got it covered. I smiled faintly, folding my hands in my lap. Actually, I don't. Madison's gaze snapped to me, sharp and probing. What do you mean? The caterers need their final payment before they'll deliver, I explained evenly. 15,000. Daniel was under the impression I'd handle it. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Then Madison's face twisted, her voice rising in a shrill pitch. Are you kidding me, Daniel? You told me everything was taken care of. You told me your mother agreed. Daniel's lips trembled. She always helps me. I thought. You thought? Madison snapped, her eyes blazing. You thought you could walk into my family's vineyard wedding and let your mom bankroll everything? Do you know how this makes me look? Her words echoed down the hallway. A few curious relatives lingered near the doorway, whispering to one another, their eyes darting between the bride and groom. I stayed perfectly still, watching it unfold. Don't look at me like that, Madison hissed at Daniel. Fix it. Now. Daniel turned back to me, his voice breaking. Mom, please, I'm begging you. If you ever loved me, if you ever wanted me to be happy, just write the check. Tell me, what kind of son begs with words like that? Not for forgiveness. Not for love. But for money. I met his desperate eyes, then slowly shook my head. I've already given you everything, Daniel. There's nothing left. The room grew colder. Madison's eyes narrowed into slits, her lips curling as though she could already taste the disaster about to unfold. And I knew then, her rage would not be quiet. Madison's face flushed red, her voice cutting through the air like broken glass. You lied to me, Daniel, she screamed, jabbing a finger into his chest. You stood there for months, bragging about how everything was paid for, how your mother was handling the details. And now, on our wedding day, you tell me the food isn't even coming? Her shrill cry carried down the hallway. Heads turned. Guests who had been sipping champagne near the courtyard drifted closer, pretending to admire the decor while straining their ears to listen. Daniel's hand shook as he tried to steady her. "Babe, calm down. We can figure this out." "Calm down," she screeched, slapping his hand away. "Do you know how humiliating this is? My family has people here from all over the country. Influential people. And you're standing here looking like a broke college kid who can't even pay his own bills." Her mother appeared in the doorway, pearl necklace gleaming under the chandelier light, her expression a mix of fury and satisfaction. "What's this nonsense I'm hearing, Madison?" Madison spun toward her. "Mother, the caterers won't deliver because Daniel's mother hasn't paid. The entire reception is falling apart because of them." All eyes shifted to me. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself. I simply folded my arms and said quietly, "It was never my responsibility." Gasps rippled through the room. Madison's father stepped forward, his face darkening. "Do you mean to tell me, young man, that your entire wedding rests on your mother's checkbook?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, trembling under his future father-in-law's glare. Madison let out a bitter laugh, her mascara beginning to smudge. "Unbelievable. I should have listened when people warned me. I thought you were a man, Daniel. Turns out you're just a boy hiding behind your mother's skirt." Her words landed like blows. Guests whispered behind their hands. Some shook their heads, pity in their eyes. Others smirked, delighted at the spectacle unraveling before them. Daniel's lips trembled as he turned toward me. "Mom, please, please help me. Don't let her walk out. Don't let this wedding fall apart. Tell me, would you have caved? Would you have stepped in to save your child, even knowing they'd never respect you afterward? Or would you have done what I did?" I met his pleading gaze, then shifted my eyes back to Madison, who stood seething in her gown, her fists clenched. "This isn't my battle," I said calmly. "This is yours." Madison let out a sharp cry, shoving Daniel backward. "You've ruined everything. My parents will never forgive you. Do you hear me? Never." Her mother clutched her pearls, shaking her head. What a disgrace. The tension grew unbearable. Guests were now openly staring, whispering as though they were at a theater instead of a wedding. The music outside faltered as the string quartet, sensing the drama, played softer until silence filled the space. Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Madison stood above him, trembling with rage, her perfect bridal image crumbling in front of the world. And I, sitting quietly in the corner, felt no shame at all. Only a quiet satisfaction. Because I knew, the worst was yet to come. By late afternoon, the cracks could no longer be hidden. Guests had been ushered into the reception hall, expecting champagne, hors d'oeuvres, and music. But the tables stood empty. No waiters drifted between the aisles, no trays of food appeared, and the bar sat bare behind polished counters. At first, people murmured quietly, glancing at their watches. But as the minutes dragged on, the whispers grew louder. "Where's the food? Did they forget the drinks? We flew all the way here for this?" I sat near the back, hands folded neatly in my lap, watching it all unfold. Madison paced the room like a wild animal in lace, her gown dragging against the marble floor. Daniel trailed after her, sweat dripping down his temples, tugging at his tie as though it might strangle him. Then, the inevitable happened. A staff member slipped inside and whispered something into the wedding planner's ear. Her face blanched, her clipboard trembling in her hands. She rushed toward Madison and Daniel, speaking in hushed tones. But everyone in the room could hear her words anyway. The caterers never loaded the trucks. They said no payment was received. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison let out a sharp, animal-like cry. "What do you mean, no payment?" Her father's booming voice followed. "Are you telling me this entire reception has been destroyed because you two couldn't pay your bills?" All eyes turned on Daniel. He stuttered, his face red and blotchy. I thought Mom." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he was about to say. But it was too late. The crowd turned toward me. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. My hands were steady. My voice calm. 6 months ago, I began, when Daniel asked me for help, I agreed because I believed in him. I believed this marriage was about love, about building a future together. So I signed contracts. I gave money I didn't have. I carried burdens that weren't mine. Gasps rippled across the hall. Madison froze, her face pale beneath her makeup. I looked directly at Daniel. But instead of gratitude, instead of respect, I was treated like a nuisance. Like a fool to be dismissed in front of strangers. My voice grew stronger. Today, you see the result of that. Not because I ruined anything, but because my son thought he could build his future on my back without ever giving me dignity. The whispers erupted into open murmurs. Some nodded, eyes shining with sympathy. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But not a soul defended Daniel. Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, don't do this here. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone." I met his desperate eyes. "Embarrass you?" "Daniel, you embarrassed yourself. I just stopped saving you." Madison ripped off her veil, her mascara smearing down her cheeks. "This is a disaster," she sobbed. "An absolute disaster." Her mother clutched her pearls, muttering, "We should have never agreed to this farce." Guests began leaving in small groups, muttering under their breath, shaking their heads as they passed. Plates sat empty, wineglasses untouched, the music from the string quartet faltering into silence. Daniel collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his hair damp with sweat, his once proud posture broken. I stood tall, clutching my purse. "This is not my shame," I said firmly. "This is the cost of arrogance." Then, without another word, I turned and walked toward the doors. Behind me, chaos erupted, Madison sobbing, her parents shouting, Daniel calling after me. But I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, my steps were light. My heart was steady. I had finally remembered my worth. And I left them to choke on the ruins of their perfect wedding. The sound of chaos faded behind me as I pushed open the grand doors of the vineyard hall. The late afternoon sun hit my face, warm and steady, as though the world outside had no idea the storm that had just erupted within those walls. My heels clicked against the stone path as I walked toward the parking lot. Each step felt lighter than the last. For years, I had bent under the weight of sacrifice. That day, with every stride, I felt myself standing taller. "Mom." Daniel's voice rang out behind me. I didn't turn. Mom, wait. His footsteps pounded against the pavement, frantic, desperate. Please, just listen. He caught up with me, grabbing my arm like a drowning man clinging to a lifeline. His tuxedo jacket hung crooked on his shoulders, his tie undone, his face streaked with sweat and humiliation. He looked nothing like the proud groom from hours earlier. Please, Mom, he begged, his voice cracking. Don't leave me like this. Everyone's watching, Madison's furious, her parents, if you just pay, we can fix this. Please. I'm begging you. I turned slowly, meeting his tear-filled eyes. For a moment, I almost saw the little boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy who clung to my leg when he was scared. My chest ached with the weight of it. But then I remembered his words, "Stop being so dramatic, Mom." I remembered the smirk on Madison's face, the laughter of her parents, the way he had chosen their approval over my dignity. I pulled my arm free. No, Daniel. I've already given you everything. And you gave me nothing but shame in return. He shook his head wildly. That's not true. I love you, Mom. You're my family. I took a steady breath. Family isn't about using someone until they break. Family is respect. And you lost mine. His lips trembled, his voice a whisper now. Why are you doing this to me? I stared at him, calm and unflinching. I'm not doing anything to you, Daniel. I'm simply not saving you this time. And the moment I stepped aside, the truth showed itself. Tears spilled down his cheeks. For the first time, he looked small, not like a man about to start a new life, but like a boy who had never learned how to stand on his own. Behind us, the muffled sounds of shouting and crying spilled from the hall. Madison's voice shrieked above the rest, her fury rattling the vineyard walls. I adjusted my purse on my shoulder, turned back toward the parking lot, and kept walking. Mom. Daniel's voice cracked one last time, echoing across the courtyard. But I didn't turn around. For decades, I had been his safety net. His cushion. His rescuer. And now, as the golden sun sank behind the hills, I chose myself instead. I didn't look back at my son crumbling in the dust. I didn't look back at the ruined wedding, the shattered illusion of perfection. For the first time in my life, I let go. And the freedom tasted sweeter than any revenge I could have ever imagined. 2 days later, I sat on my porch in Sacramento, rocking slowly in my chair, a warm cup of tea in my hands. The air smelled of lilacs, the sky stretched wide and blue. To the neighbors, it looked like an ordinary morning. But inside me, I felt like a woman reborn. The phone rang. I let it buzz twice before answering. Mom? Daniel's voice was hoarse, raw from crying. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw him at 8 years old, running home with scraped knees, begging me to patch him up. But the voice on the phone wasn't that little boy. It was a grown man who had dug his own grave and was finally standing in it. Madison left, he whispered. Her parents cut ties with me. They said I humiliated them. The guests are talking. Everyone knows. I don't know what to do. I said nothing. He sobbed into the phone. Why did you do this to me? My grip tightened on the teacup. I let the silence linger long enough for him to feel it, then spoke slowly, each word steady as stone. I didn't do anything to you, Daniel. I simply stopped saving you. And when I stepped aside, the truth showed itself: you built your life on sand. That's not my fault. That's yours. He choked on his tears, but I didn't soften. For years, I had been his cushion, his fixer, his endless supply of forgiveness. And where had it left me? Alone. Disrespected. Invisible. He whispered again, softer this time. I'm sorry, Mom. The apology came too late, but it was the first honest thing I had heard from him in years. I let out a long sigh, not of forgiveness, but of release. Daniel, I said, my voice firm but not unkind, sorry doesn't erase the choices you made. Maybe one day you'll learn what respect really means. Until then, you'll have to live with the consequences of your own actions. I hung up before he could reply. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. That evening, I took out my old leather notebook, the same one I had used to budget bills, the same one I had carried to Madison's parents' house. I opened a fresh page and began to write. Not numbers this time, but truths. Truth: love without respect is slavery. Truth: sacrifice without gratitude becomes exploitation. Truth: even a mother must learn when to stop saving her children. I wrote until the page was full, until the tears blurred the ink. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of clarity. Neighbors who saw me in the following days asked why I seemed lighter, why I walked taller, why my eyes glowed brighter. I told them simply, because I remembered my worth. You see, revenge isn't always about destroying someone else. Sometimes, revenge is simply refusing to let yourself be destroyed any longer. Daniel still calls sometimes. His voice is smaller now, humble. He works long hours at a warehouse job, struggling to pay off debts that no longer belong to me. He lives in a cramped apartment, stripped of the illusions of wealth and status. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson is finally seeping in. Do I forgive him? Not yet. Forgiveness, like trust, must be earned, not demanded. But when I close my eyes at night, I don't see his betrayal anymore. I see myself standing tall in that vineyard hall, purse on my shoulder, walking away while the world crumbled behind me. I see the moment I chose my dignity over his arrogance. And I see freedom. Tell me, what would you have done if it were your son? Would you have written the check to save face, or would you have walked away to save your soul? I know my answer. And I will never regret it. Because I learned something powerful that day: the strength of a mother is not in how much she gives, but in knowing when to stop giving. And that, my friends, was the sweetest revenge of all. But life has a way of testing us again and again. And little did I know, Daniel's choices weren't the only storm brewing in my family. Because soon, another betrayal would knock on my door, this time from the last person I thought capable of hurting me. And when that day came, the lesson I had learned in that vineyard would become my only weapon.